again, there has never been a strategy enunciated by President Trump and the administration. Frankly, whatever's written on paper doesn't matter because President Trump is impulse driven. So at the end of the day, I just think we're where we were months ago. There's no resolution in sight. And you got to be very careful of these claims. I could end this war in 24 hours. You know, how well did that go down? That's a lot of nonsense. But if you know nothing about Ukraine, know nothing about Eastern Europe, nothing about Russia, and you view yourself as a brilliant deal maker, this is sort of another exercise in selling the used car. And I don't think that works. And so while he may have meant well, and I'm perfectly willing to accept that possibility, nothing of substance came out of it.
And I think you could probably just carry that on through right to Washington, D.C. A week ago on Monday when he had Zelensky and then the European leaders all paraded across the Oval Office. And again, I think that they reiterated where they were weeks, if not months before that. I don't see any change in them either. Do you?
No, not yet. We can come back to that. I do want to make a comment, though, about this particular photograph because General Kellogg apparently has endeared himself to the Russians quite a bit. He apparently has been using the same cell phone and cell phone number, though encrypted over and over and over again for months, maybe years. And as a result, the Russians were able to follow all of his activities whenever he visited Chazov Yar, Chernigov, any of these places. And it is being used for targeting. So that many of the targeted locations that I just mentioned that he's visited have been utterly and completely destroyed, along with whatever military personnel were present, including NATO and including U.S. So he's been a real boon to Russian intelligence.
Wow, did not know that.
Well, I don't think most people do aware of it either until somebody in the intelligence community pointed it out to me. So it's tragic, but I'm afraid it's true.
And now let's continue on back because the issue is not just what Trump may or may not say. I think that's actually a very interesting observation you made about a ongoing reality TV show because that certainly matches what we've seen. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but wow, that's pretty accurate. Unfortunately, it's not just him, or at least there's other actors on here. This is former Secretary of State, former CIA Director Mike Pompeo on Fox News. Having a banter about the part of the claim that that Trump got Russia to agree that they would take back the Donbass area, that Ukraine would evacuate it and hand that back over. And Pompeo basically just mocks that and laughs at the idea. It says it's just posturing.
Even to suggest for a moment that they would get all of the Donbass, which is a region that they've been fighting to control wholly for a long time, have been failing to do so, and they just want it for nothing, you know, before they've given away anything major. Is that something that can be dismissed pretty readily?
Yes, David, I think it could be dismissed quite readily. In fact, think about this. The Russians have lost somewhere between 200 and 250,000 soldiers. That's dead. That's not casualties. Casualties are multiples of that. In a decade plus of fighting, the United States lost 50,000 soldiers. I mean, the staggering death toll is very real. Putin knows that. And so when he makes this claim that someone's going to give him some real estate that has been fought over like this, I think he knows that's not right. In the end, President Zelensky is going to have to likely accept that some of the real estate that the Russians have taken, he's not going to be able to reclaim immediately. He won't be forced to recognize it. I think there's a deal in there that can be reached that is fair and just and provides sustainable another, pick a number, 25 years of peace if we get the security guarantee piece of this right.
All we have to do is get Russia to agree to give in on almost all of their positions from a position of strength. What do you say to that?
Well, remember, this is the same man who pointed out that when he was the head of the CIA, it was his job to lie. And I think he's done an excellent job of it. He continues to lie about all of this business in Ukraine. He's adopted this utterly fictitious narrative that everything started with Putin's decision some morning to wake up and decide to invade Ukraine. It's all nonsense. I wouldn't pay much attention to anything that Pompeo says. I would just dismiss it out of hand. It's unworthy of serious discussion. And by the way, I think President Trump would probably say that privately as well.
And it's unfortunate, though, because you certainly know that and have good reason to making that statement. But most people watching television, they don't know that. They think, wow, former CIA director, former Secretary of State, he must carry a lot of weight. He certainly is still friendly in terms with President Trump. But one wonders what the purpose then of having him say stuff like that. And by the way, this was in a certain sense mirrored by Emmanuel Macron about a week or so ago when he was mocking the Russian side, because you saw the anchor there said, well, it's ridiculous to think that Russia, who couldn't take the Donbass in all these 3.5 years, they're just going to be giving it to them. Macron kind of echoed that and says, well, look, in the last, I think it's since November 2022, they said Russia's only captured an additional 1% of territory, so they really aren't that capable. So what do you say to those kind of comments?
Well, we've been down this road before. Putin framed this as a special military operation. He did not frame it as an all-out war. But he discovered after the first several months, certainly after the first 6 months of action, that he was not really facing Ukraine. He was facing the United States and the West, primarily U.S. military power and all of its enormously valuable capabilities from seabed to space. When that was finally discovered and understood, and it wasn't understood at the beginning, because I think President Putin, who's always been very favorable in his thinking about the West, had to come to the conclusion that this was a completely malicious action on the part of the United States to destroy Russia. When that happened, everything began to change. I just think that Macron is another globalist. The globalists in London, Paris, and Berlin are all clinging desperately to power right now. Their populations almost universally loathe Macron, Starmer, and Merz. But the oppressive apparatus that they control, the media that they control, the governmental institutions, the intelligence services are working overtime day and night to suppress any possible emergence of a viable opponent. And that's what's happened to the Alternative for Germany. It's happened in France. It's happening in England especially, but also Scotland and Wales to a lesser extent. And the sad part is that it's hopeless because the war is being won by the Russians. Now, this business of territory, President Putin did not set out on this operation to capture territory, never did. We're the ones that keep obsessing over territory. What he set out to do was to utterly and completely annihilate the Ukrainian threat. That Ukrainian threat was manifested by its paramilitary and armed forces. They are just about gone. Let's face it, they've been killed in great numbers. We now have all sorts of information saying anywhere from 1.7 to 1.8 million Ukrainians have been killed on this eastern Ukrainian battlefield. And that's really been the objective, to destroy that entity. The Russians are now operating on the other side of the river. And a lot of people don't realize this, on the outskirts of Odessa. You've got special operations forces there directing strikes and eliminating the Odessa base of operation for the regime. I think you're going to see more of that in the future. But again, if you go back to historical experience and the origins of what we call Ukraine and New Russia that was created under Catherine the Great, that goes back to the capture of Crimea and then the settlement of the areas along the Black Sea out to the Romanian border and all the way up along the Dnieper River. Those things are real, and Putin has made it very clear that that portion, which is settled by Russians, populated by Russians, where the Russians speak, read, and write their language and their culture is predominant, those will be protected. They will be kept. They will not be given up.